So this message is regarding Charlie Kirk, and it's not political. So let me just say that at the outright. I live in Washington, D.C., yes, but I'm not a political person. Anyone who knows me can vouch for me that I really don't care about politics. I probably should care more than I do, maybe. But for me, God is who reigns, and Jesus is my king, and so I don't spend too much time worrying about what's happening on the political landscape. Having said that, I understand that Charlie Kirk was a political person, and he was very much on the side of the right and Donald Trump. And I know that there's so many people that can't stand Donald Trump, but I understand why. Believe me, I've heard it all. Like I said, I live in Washington, D.C. I've heard all the discussions and the arguments on both sides of the aisle, but this is not what this video is about. This video is about what is going on in the spiritual realm with regard to what happened with Charlie Kirk. Okay. For those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is Anna McKessie. I am a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. And one of them is that I channel the angels. I worked as a psychic medium for a while, going back to when I was a little kid and I saw dead people, as they say. It all kind of came back when I went through my high conflict divorce. And so I was, I don't know, re-triggered, I guess. And so and my gifts have really grown a lot in the last couple of years. So I will say that. And as a result of that, I'm very much getting divine downloads all the time. It started out with the death of my brother when I was young, like I said, and then it moved on to other ancestors in my adulthood. It moved into the angelic realm, mostly Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, but the other angels as well. And then it moved into the Galactics, which surprised me because I had been someone who didn't believe in ET life until they started speaking to me. So that's a little bit about me. So I'm coming at this from a spiritual perspective, from someone who probably spends more time than she should traversing the spiritual realm, connecting, meditating, getting downloads, like I said. And you know, Charlie's death was part of his soul assignment, okay? So while his personality, I'm sure, had no intention of leaving his, when he did at 31 with a wife and 2 young children, it was part of his soul contract to have various exit points, potential exit points. And if he was going to be needed for a purpose, he was going to have to exit. And from what I've been told from the angelics and the galactics, there was an agreement made with his soul that this was a potential exit point at the age of 31 with all that's going on. And he was tapped, to say, okay, we need you to come transition over because you will have more impact with your death than you would in your life. And again, Charlie Kirk personality, I'm sure, was not aware. Charlie Kirk's soul was very aware because, as you probably already know, we are not just physical beings in a physical body, but we're also spiritual beings in a physical body. We have a soul self as well as a personality or ego self. And the soul self doesn't always have the same agenda maybe as the personality self, right? So, and the other part of this too is that our consciousness can exist outside of us. So we have a higher self that might not be contained within our physical body, which is why in meditation, people can tap into that higher consciousness that can be existing outside of their physical body. And I know that's a lot to take in, but I'm just laying the groundwork for how these things happen. So what I've been told and what the Galactics have even posted, I think, on social media is this was an agreed exit point when things were looking the way they're looking with how the spiritual war is going. And the timing of his death was necessary to instigate what's now happening, which is a spiritual revival. I just saw my mother, God bless her, she's 92 years old. She loves to watch the news, but because she only watches the news and doesn't get on social media, she had no idea, which clued me into the fact that this is not something that's being broadcast on the news. Again, I'm not a political person. I don't really watch the news, so I didn't know this. I thought everybody knew about this revivalist movement happening, but apparently, unless you're tapped in and watching social media, you wouldn't necessarily know this, okay? Across college campuses, all over the place, and in unexpected places as well, like all over the world, Korea, Pakistan, Brazil, London, you name it, there are demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations going on where people are marching and saying Christ is King and worshiping in droves, which is beautiful. As a well, I shouldn't say I'm a religious person. As a spiritual person, it's very heartwarming and it's very moving and it's very hopeful, especially in such dark times as we've been having. We've been living in really, really dark times. I don't need to repeat what's obvious, right? But again, I'm not a religious person, even though I grew up Catholic. I consider myself more of a spiritual person because I see religion as a human construct and not necessarily what God had intended, which was really a personal relationship with Him, with Jesus, with God. And that's another whole video. But my point of this video is to really awaken those who haven't realized that this revivalist movement is happening. Okay, so the light and the dark are still at battle, but we're doing an incredible job because we've awakened so many people to the reality of the fact that God is King. Jesus is King, and there are people going back to church. There are people opening their Bibles for the first time. There's atheists turning to God, and all of this was triggered by the death of Charlie Kirk, as well as the incoming solar flares and the light that's flooding the planet right now. Okay, so there's a lot going on behind the scenes that the physical eye might not see, but the spiritual eye can very much see is happening. And again, it's really exciting. It's really heartwarming. And it's, for someone that's been waiting for something like this, it's wonderful to see. And I'm sure there are many of you that might feel the same way. Now, is there another side to this where there's those that are mocking his death, rejoicing, celebrating his death? Of course, because the dark will always react that way when something happens that's of a high vibration. When something is involving bringing us closer to God, of course there's going to be that kind of a backlash. So that's not surprising to me. It's sad, it's unfortunate, and from what I've heard from Galactic Federation, those that are celebrating anyone's harm or death, anybody, anywhere, that's going to have a repercussion for that person. It's going to affect them in a bad way. They're going to have their own personal tragedy play out, whether because of the karma behind what they're doing or because maybe it's part of their soul contract or soul plan. We don't know. But what we do know is it's unfortunate, but we can't focus on it, and we shouldn't, because what we give our attention to is where our energy will go. So we rather keep our energy flowing towards the positive, the higher timeline, and what's happening right now, which is really great news, really, really good news. And it's taking a turn, and many people have called it the turning point. Yes, it's a reference to Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA, but it's also very apropos to what's been happening right now, which is we're really seeing a change. Now, the last thing I will say is, unfortunately, because there are many established religions that are concerned about keeping a congregation going, finances, and staying in the good graces of their congregation, and are worried about the politics behind Charlie Kirk's death, and are worried about the optics of even acknowledging what happened and the repercussions and the consequences and the revival that's happening, because they're so worried about people who lean left and didn't like Charlie Kirk, they're remaining silent. I just posted a reel on Instagram about this. Shame on you if you're a pastor of a church anywhere, a Christian church, or whatever religion it is, but if you're not excited about what's happening right now, about this revivalist movement, if you're not bringing it to your congregation, if they weren't aware, which they probably are if they're watching social media, right? If you're not talking about it, if you're not celebrating it, there is something seriously wrong, and shame on you. That's my own view. As someone who sees what's happening in the spiritual realm, shame on you, because you are being led by fear rather than God. You're letting fear overtake you and worry about what people think, worrying about the left-leaning members of your congregation who you are afraid of alienating. And that is not as important as following God's word, God's promises, God's direction, which is towards the light, excuse me, and leading people towards the light, leading them there, showing them what's happening, making them excited about the revivalist movement. That's what pastors should be doing right now, regardless of what religion. So that's my opinion. I understand that this is not shared by everybody, but this is the truth of what God is expecting of us. which is to bring others closer to him and not worry about the politics and not care about the politics, because that's an earthly construct. And what we're talking about are spiritual, heavenly, divine constructs. And that's where our focus should be. Thank you for listening.